Okay, welcome to our new series. We have just a little recap. We've been doing Mazel Mondays for a long time, and I say that in a way that it's very apropos to what's going on. We're learning how to change Mazel and nullify evil decrees, and it's always been relevant. It's never not been relevant. And we're not going to finish the whole book because it's not all directly relevant or practical, but we're in the heart of that book. So that's Mazel Monday nights. And Tuesday is Zohar Parshas Noach, which how apropos can that be, right? Learning how to social distance, isolate, put yourself in an enclosure, and avoid the wrath of what's going on around you. We've been doing that for a while, and again, all the more so, more apropos now than ever. And I don't think Mazel and Noah will ever go out of style. And that's why we're doing it. Wednesday has usually been different things: Ger class, King Solomon, wisdom, Daniel, Song of Songs, whatever we're in the mood to do. And with all the things going on, I've been doing a lot of research, trying to stay, I hate this, I keep saying this, and I don't mean it as a pun, but it's staying ahead of the curve. And the data that I'm finding is so overwhelming, and the misinformation is so upsetting. I also, with a radio interview I did in January, which I'll mention in a second. With all of those things together, I decided we're going to do this class on Wednesdays because I just think it's an obligation, at least on by my for my own self, and we're all in this together. This is a universal problem and situation going on, and we need to understand what's going on. And the more I get into studying viruses, very low grade, I'm not, hold on, I want to get this word right. What do you call the guy who studies viruses? I keep forgetting how to pronounce it. Study of, I don't want to say it wrong. There's virology. It's the epidemic study. It's the epidemiology. Is that how you say it? Epidemiology. That's what, yeah. That's a great concept. Epidemiology. Remember, these are all new terms for me. And so if I'm going to make a lot of mistakes, pronounce them wrong, and I do apologize for that. So there's epidemiology. And 2 weeks ago, before the exponential growth hit America, which South Africa is starting to get theirs a little bit now, and Israel's getting its now, what do you call a person that studies this? If you're an epidemiology, what are you, an epidemiologist?
I guess.
How you say it? Epidemiologist. Let's see if that's true. How do you spell it? Epidemiologist. All right. Epidemiologist. So like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Epidemiology and epidemiologist. All right. So the epidemiologists, and again we got tipped off a little bit before South Africa because we shut down before you guys, and obviously China and Italy shut down before us, and now Americans are getting hit with the new nomenclature, right? So it all came to fruition for me when the gyms got closed. That makes sense, right? Saturday night, I'm up late, and the question is, am I going to the gym tomorrow? And once the gyms closed and the schools were closed, reality got right in your face here in Israel. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. I'm not going to the gym. I'm not going, Abigail's not going to work. So I'm home. I'm largely home. And everyone was talking, the epidemiologists were talking about exponential growth and the curve, and we have to flatten the curve. Everyone's saying we have to flatten the curve. So that whole week, I'm studying that field of math on YouTube, right? Learning how exponential growth works. Again, I'm not an expert, and I don't think I have to be. I have to just be able to follow the Iker terms and jargon terms of what's going on so that you're not behind, I keep saying it, behind the curve. Going into that Shabbos, if the math is correct, then everyone is saying America is destined to hit the exponential growth curve, right? And we've all seen this before, doomsday scenarios. When there was Fukushima, everyone is saying, the nuclear fallout will kill us all. Maybe it will, but I don't see Fukushima in the news anywhere. Do you? And then there was in 2012 the hydrogen collider and the physics experiments, and we're still here. And then there's a comet coming. Remember the Elenin comet, and there's an asteroid coming. There's always been these doomsday scenarios and the pseudoscience or pseudomath to support the claim. And I will admit I fell victim to some of these back in 2012. The comet was very compelling. I think we've all been compelled by something in recent history. And then they come and go, and the experts always are there to say, kind of, I told you so. Oh, it's a big comet, it's coming to get us. And the experts are saying it's not a big comet, it's not a doomsday, it's a little thing, da 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 da. And then people, they just look for the next one. Then it's what's that planet that's supposed to clash into us, Nibiru? I never was into that one. And there's the Mayan calendar. So as I'm doing my usual meditation of kind of figuring out where I was, where I am, where I'm going. Anytime I get into a situation in my life, I do that meditation. Where am I? Where was I? Where are we going? And I started to think about Messianism. And there's a Zohar that says the Mashiach will come in the year ending year 70. And it's up for interpretation. And so the decade up to the year 70 in the Jewish calendar, 5770, i.e. the 60s, was kicked off with the Intifada and 9/11. And I made Aliyah in 2001, just after 9/11. And I was a raw Bo Tshuva then, so I don't know how much I really knew. Even thinking back, I don't really remember what I was thinking or knowing because I didn't know much. But I did think we were in a special time. And I do think it was a special time. But after going to yeshiva and you cool down a little bit and you start to get into Torah, I remember terrorism in Israel was really bad at that time. And then the whole Gaza, Gush Katif expulsion. And then living in Sfat, we had a run from the Hezbollah war. And that's when in my personal life things got pretty intense. And I saw missiles explode, right in the old city of Sfat. Several missiles came down. That's pretty surreal when you are around Katyusha rockets. And I remember very pragmatic, logical rabbis were saying, we don't know if this is the end or Mashiach, but you can certainly make a case for what's going on. Now, they ended up not being correct. Nothing happened. And that was around 2006. And around 2010, figure a good 3-4 years, 5 years later, the Arab world's going to erupt, and it's right around that year 70, right? That Zohar year 70. And we get the Arab Spring, and that was pretty crazy. And a lot of people thought that was the end, and the Mashiach blogs on the internet were erupting, and it was a very exciting time. And I remember thinking back then, man, if Assad would fall, because Hussein went down, and a lot of things happened in the Middle East. And I remember thinking, if Assad goes, then we really know something's going on. Isn't it crazy that Assad is still in power? Isn't that something? It really does baffle my mind. This has been going on now for almost at least about 10 years with that guy. So the Arab Spring has so much potential in the Torah world of people thinking, the exile of Ishmael. And then that quickly turned into the Hydrogen Collider, and then it just got crazy metaphysics, comets and asteroids and the Nibiru. It got stupid. Okay, it just straight up, flat out got stupid. And that's when I quickly realized not to buy into hype and hysteria. And it was a transition coming from the yeshiva world to the regular world. Because it's amazing how much of the yeshiva world buys into hype and hysteria. A lot of educated Torah people believe in the Nibiru, and I think it's a bit silly. And that's what I'm saying about the timeline of forward and backward. By the time Obama's tenure was over, obviously Trump hysteria took off like none other. But that was so secular. Everything about it. It was just politics. A lot of Jews had passionate views, and non-Jews. Trump's tenure kicked off in 2016. And we saw nothing but bickering and fighting. The economy recovered. And it's been pretty quiet on the Messiah front, and the Doomsday front, and all these other fronts. I would even say it got pretty boring. Life just became status quo, very much in the routine. The Ger thing kicked off in around 2010 or 11. In the middle of that hysteria, Arab Spring and people leaving the church, technology got to the point where you can easily get on Facebook. Smartphones came out. I didn't get my first smartphone until 2012. So it was a huge explosion. And then it just kind of got boring, old, in a rut. And by the last year or two, I think every rabbi on the planet is now on the internet. I was one of the, I don't know if I was one of the actual first ones, but I've been around the internet a long time. I've literally been online since I was 16. And I was a part of the virtual yeshiva in 2007. And that was way ahead of its time. And, I was early on Facebook. And now, or when I got involved with Noahide, I was literally one of the first ones. I mean, there was obviously people that have been around since the 80s, but relatively speaking, I was one of the first ones. Now, every rabbi on the planet is a Noahide expert. And they're all on Facebook. They all are on the internet. So it's not a chiddush to be on the internet as a Torah Jew. And I think it's watered things down. And it just got boring. It became very boring. So 16 rolls around, 17 rolls around, 18 rolls around, 19 rolls around. And it got to the point where, I don't know, I just think it was saturated. So in the current mold of where we're at, I'm trying to think. Let's start with Michael Clark. January 26th. Again, I do have this in my head. I'm just trying to pull all the points together. January 26th, I do a radio interview. I just got back from Texas a couple weeks ago. And to prove that Iker terms are all over the place, and that's going to be the main theme of this series. Understanding what I call Iker terms, nomenclature terms, jargon terms. Iker terms are a highly spiritual thing. They're charged. They look boring, generic, dull, and they're highly charged, which is a total contradiction. So we as I was giving in the interview, I said, you know what? Let's go to Google News, pick the first article we see, and let's read it. And I promise you, we will think we understand it, and I bet you we don't. And that video, by the way, is on YouTube. When we start to read it, and I had a big problem. I actually did think that I understood everything. And I was struggling in the interview trying to find the Iker term. And it's so funny Because I really believed, and I was sweating in that interview, struggling to find humility to say, I really don't know what that word is. I really don't know what this word is. I wasn't trying to be arrogant. I just really thought I knew. Which, by the way, that's how Iker terms work. Every time you read something, you will think you know. That's the whole point of it. But I'm usually quick to admit and find the words that I don't know. Like I remember Michael Clark and I did another show where we had to find the word big data. And I thought, what does big data really mean? We looked it up, and it's a whole Iker term. The only word I could find in that interview, in that article, you're going to laugh because it's funny. Funny that I thought I knew and had to really struggle to prove that I don't know what a coronavirus is. That was the only word I could find, coronavirus. Do you realize how stupid that is? To actually think on January 26th that I had the gall in my own head to contemplate saying, yeah, I think I know what a coronavirus is. Do you guys realize how stupid that is? And that thing was being reported, and everybody on Earth was saying, like, yeah, coronavirus. Another Iker term in that article was Wuhan. Yeah, I'm sure I know all about the city in China called Wuhan. I know all about it, yeah. And I found that article a couple days ago, and I reread it, and I thought, good Lord. This thing is all Iker terms. It came out January 26th when we blew it off like, yeah. And it was saying in the article, not a big threat to the Americans. Do you realize how profound the time that we're in and how it came to light around that time, January? And I had forgotten all about it. I really didn't care about that article, that interview in that way. And as Purim was approaching, people started to say that they had heard of people coming to Israel. I didn't really pay attention to from where, but apparently from New York. We're in quarantine. And I didn't pay attention. It didn't bother me too much. But by the time Purim came, they were threatening canceling the Purim party. Now, my wife, Abigail, wanted to win the Purim costume contest. Usually, I could care too, it's about a Purim party. Not exactly a party animal. But because of my family now, I was forced to participate in a costume contest. Well, in theory. I think we actually would have won that contest. Abigail dressed up with her new potbelly, wearing the clothes that I used to wear. I saved one suit and one shirt. And I was actually able to fit into her art studio clothes, ironically enough. And we went to a bat mitzvah celebration dressed that way. It was kind of funny. And Reuven dressed up as Zohari, and Zohari dressed up as Reuven. But the party was empty. The shul party was canceled. And they were talking about you can't gather more than 100. Which the Purim party and the Kiddush would have been more than that. So I started to think, all right, it's a little annoying. I think they're overreacting a little bit. I forget which day Purim was, a Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't remember the timeline exactly, whether it was that Shabbos or the next one, but the announcement came out that the gyms were canceled. And that's obviously when I knew. That's when I knew. My personal trainer course got canceled. Schools were canceled. I'm now homeschooling my kids. So reality struck. And I took off that week to learn about exponential growth. And then when America started to spike after Shabbos, I knew the math was real. And again, all the other mass hysteria events, it was always pseudoscience. I mean, what's the big gripe on global warming? Is that they say it's pseudoscience. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but they have not proven that it is real science. And when I say not proven, there's not a global consensus to endorse global warming. It may be getting there. It may be gaining steam, pun intended. But it's certainly not universally endorsed. We don't have gasless cars. They have not made the change. And they debate the science. But I remember sitting on my couch with Abigail, and Bibi comes on YouTube and says, "This is a Magifa Amiti. This is a true plague." And I started to realize slowly this is not a joke or pseudo anything. And I said to myself, if America spikes the way that these charts are showing, and they showed the numbers, they showed the chart, and it was legit. America did spike. The math worked out. The wrestling championships got canceled. The basketball championships got canceled. Basketball got canceled. And now the Olympics are canceled. And every day, massive changes were coming. Every sector of the world started checking in. So by the time that week had ended, we came out of Shabbos, and the math was real. My next mission was again through Michael Clark. We revisited the article, and what's been thrown around the news was this is the greatest threat to man in society since the Spanish flu. And then Trump is calling it the Chinese virus. And the Spanish flu didn't even start in Spain. So why are they calling it the Chinese virus? And we looked into the Spanish flu. And it started to sink in a lot of these terms and concepts. And so the whole week, I got into, was that this week or last week? I'm already confused because every week is so different. It's like they say, where was America a week ago? I mean, this thing, it takes 1 or 2 weeks before it rocks your world. So pardon me if I lose my timeline without having to take time to really meditate and think when it all started. Because it all went so fast. I mean, Purim was not that long ago. But it seems like an eternity ago. So to skip ahead in the story, and I'm going to bounce around a little bit because there is no linear time to how I want to present this. One of the first things that I had to realize, and this is where Wikipedia is one of your best friends. When locating Iker terms, you have to find that inner humility to erase stigmas and the arrogance of, I already know that. Now, how could I have thought that I knew what a coronavirus was? I couldn't even pronounce it correctly in the interview. If you're not, that's like rule number 1. If you're not pronouncing it right, you better look it up. And it was called at that time a fast-moving virus. Okay. A virus that moves very fast. What is there to know about that? Those are 2 massive Iker terms. Coronavirus and fast-moving virus. And the reason why you think you know that is because it sounds, okay, there's a virus called corona. What do you want from me? Ostensibly, it moves very fast. Yeah, it moves fast. Thank you. But those are not real terms. They don't mean anything, and they're not real. There is not a coronavirus going on right now. There's not even a virus going on right now. Do you realize that? There's no virus, and there's nothing corona about it. The hoopla is about a disease caused by a virus. Very much like we used to hear and still somewhat hear about these two things called HIV and AIDS. And I'm sure you remember at some point in your life, you had to learn the distinction that HIV is not AIDS and AIDS is not HIV. HIV is the virus that causes AIDS. And we seem to have forgotten how the game works when it comes to coronavirus. The disease today has a temporary name to it. Maybe it will become permanent. Maybe they will change it. That disease is being presently called COVID-19. And that disease is tangible. And it comes with symptoms. And if you have the symptoms, there's a protocol. The symptoms may get severe. That will create and mandate hospitalization. Hospitalization may require a ventilator, intensive care, and may even result in death. Now, just by extending the situation like I did from, oh, it's a virus, okay, it's a fast-moving virus. Just spelling out the little bit that I spelled out already tells you we are not so concerned with a virus. One of the major concerns is that hospitals don't have the capacity to take a bunch of newly sick people. Now, we usually think of when we have to go to the hospital, what's the problem? I had a surgery, whatever it was. I went in, nice people, they gave me a bed, and I went home. But isn't that a little bit arrogant of you? And a little bit naive to think because you went to a hospital and you were taken care of, you all of a sudden know the infrastructure of hospitals. It's like when you come on Birthright in Israel, you say, oh, Israel's great. Great food. They took care of us, which maybe it is. Israel is great, but you don't know the country by coming on a Birthright tour. Getting a nice scheduled surgery is kind of like Birthright. Good food, good sleep, good taken care of, and you go home. I also had to go to the hospital when I had my most recent surgery for a pre-existing condition. And I had a complication that I couldn't go to the bathroom so well. And we had to go to the emergency room. Absolute nightmare. It was a zoo. So already there's a difference between emergency room and a scheduled surgery. And the reason why I had to go to the emergency room was because they kicked me out of the hospital so soon. I recovered, I woke up, they made sure I was okay, and they kicked me out. I kind of would have liked to have stayed just in case there was a complication. No, go home, you're okay. So the following was a chaotic nightmare of trying to go to the emergency room. I had to get a catheter put in. It was a nightmare. That's just my little story. Now, there's on its way of over 400,000 cases by now of coronavirus, whatever coronavirus is, COVID-19. And those people are real numbers being admitted into real hospitals where there's a real shortage of staff and manpower. Now, the question is, COVID-19 disease. There's a lot of questions. Who named it that? And where does it come from? And once you start asking these questions, such as those, what is a virus? What is a disease? How do viruses cause diseases? We all kind of learned these things when we were younger, kind of. Maybe you've had a disease from a virus, so maybe you know a little bit better. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of unanswered questions. And there's a huge learning curve in front of us. And you don't have to know it. You don't have to have gone through the Sugi and learned it. But when you look in the news, this goes without saying, and it's quite obvious. You're going to read and hear nothing except for corona stuff, unless you choose to be willfully ignorant of the situation, which you have every right to do. But I find that hard to believe. When most of us are on some form of shutdown, I think it's in your best interest to open your eyes to what's going on. And the politicians are talking about it. You want to be able to follow what they're saying. But people are not reporting what the material is. And it's very similar to the Noahide gear stuff. The assumption is you're just not too smart that you should get it. I think that's an insult to the intelligence. I think we are smart enough. I think we do owe it to ourselves and each other to spread true wisdom. And there's a huge similarity to what's going on with the Noahide gear stuff in terms of taxonomy, classification, which we'll be getting into in this series. So in my research is ongoing. A virus is not alive. It's controversial. It has aspects of being alive, and it has aspects of not being alive. And again, I'm just regurgitating this. You feel free to look it up on Wikipedia and read for yourself and do further research. It's a question where viruses come from, but it's largely accepted they've been around since the beginning of time. And again, I'm not claiming to be a scientist or an expert. I'm regurgitating. So don't take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But as I remember learning and recall, a virus, whether it is entirely, whatever it is, it has its genetic material. Now, obviously, I'm being extremely general with that. But the point is the question: what is a virus? Look it up, read about it, and then when you hear there's this virus going around, and then they'll say it's kind of like the flu. I don't know why they're shutting us down if it's just the flu. Every year the flu comes. This thing isn't killing much more than the flu, so why are we not going to work? So the next question is, what is the flu? Every year we hear about the flu and vaccinations. What is a vaccination? Then I started thinking, What is the difference between the common cold and the flu? And there's not that much of a difference in terms of on the surface. Pun intended. A cold can have flu-like symptoms, and it seems like the flu is more severe that it turns into like a body ache, could be more pneumonia. These things are all very specific in their taxonomy, where they derive from, the genetic material. On the surface, it's very vague to differentiate. So the Spanish flu was a flu. And it was a novel strain. That strain was novel. There was no immunity. It turned deadly in its second wave. Globalization from World War I movement helped spread it into a pandemic. Why and how it killed so many is subject to theory. Most viral study, as I'm finding, is subject to theory. Some theories are strong, some are not. Some become proven, some not. But it's interesting because is that what we said? Virology? Is that what we said? Is a unique science, because since it's genetic, they can become very precise in tracking it and studying it. Think about it. If genetics leave a code in an imprint, a footprint, you can perfectly trace it back. So they're getting very, very exact results, but they're missing so much of the code. For example, if 1 million people become diagnosed with David Katz-eosis, David Katz affected 1 million people, infected 1 million people. If you took samples of the virus in those 1 million people, you would have a greater understanding of the virus than if you had a sample from 10 people. So if the 1 million people were spread across 100 countries, David Katz really got around. That you would have to have a cooperation with the 100 countries. Now, what if they didn't want to cooperate? Then the research would be missing the data. And right now, that's what's going on. There's a lot of data on a brand new virus. Now, is the novelty of this corona thing the same novelty as the Spanish flu thing? In Brisk, we talk about Sveidenim. Two laws derived from one thing. The Spanish flu was a novel strain of a pre-existing known virus of the flu. If memory serves correctly, the flu came from birds, avian. Correct me if I'm wrong. I may be wrong. Just saying, that's what I remember it being. And in 2009, President Obama, under his watch, there was another pandemic of a similar flu. The same virus, but another novel strain. A strain is different than the virus. This is all subject to taxonomy. Right? There's Earth, there's continents, countries, states, cities, towns, streets, houses. If a strain is like a house, a virus is like a town. Same town, different street, different house. Same virus, different strain. So when they're saying that the coronavirus is a novel virus, first of all, they never said that. They've never called this a novel virus. That was you saying that. They call it a novel coronavirus, not to be confused with a novel virus. Novel virus would mean it's a brand new virus. It's not a brand new virus. It's a novel coronavirus. And what does novel coronavirus mean? It's a temporary term. For a pre-existing coronavirus that is novel to mankind. It made the jump from the animal kingdom to our kingdom. If I butchered that, I apologize. Google on Wikipedia, novel coronavirus. It's on Wikipedia. Something to that effect. It's a taxon. It's a temporary name until they give it a proper name. There's a whole set of terminology with this stuff. And I have all the files that I send. When I find on Wikipedia, I send it to my email. So I can reference if you ask me. Again, I'm trying to recall from memory. And I think I'm not doing too bad at that. So what you're calling a novel virus, which is actually a novel coronavirus, which creates a disease called COVID-19, which is a taxon. It's a taxonomy, not even a real thing. The disease has symptoms, which is very real, but what we call it was made up by an organization. And again, I forget the name of that organization. I can tell you. It's here, I'll tell you. That's an important one. That's an important one. Yeah, first of all, the term is novel coronavirus. I'm looking at it now. The International Committee on Taxonomy of Viruses is the international organization that determines what these things are called. It's not Donald Trump that decides. It's not the doctors that decide. It's not the media that decides. There's a proper organization that decides and creates the taxonomy. And they have an agenda. An agenda is not a bad word here. Just like when you name your kid, you have an agenda. You're trying to convey something that means something to you and the world with your kid. When they name it, they're trying to use wisdom to convey whatever point they feel needs to be conveyed. Right? If there comes out a disease from a virus from licking windows, and the WHO would say, would you please stop licking windows? They would call it licking window-itis. And they would dafka want this stigma because they don't want you licking windows. Stop licking windows. That's the way they think. They're trying to convey what they're trying to convey. Now, let's say there's a disease, a fatal disease from holding hands. They wouldn't call it the holding hands disease or the Romeo and Juliet disease. They don't want to stigmatize husband and wife holding hands. So they'd have to think, what do we call this thing? And for every new disease and virus found, they got to think of what to call it. And there's a story that goes into what to call it. So the virus that you're calling a coronavirus, or a novel coronavirus, or a novel whatever, is called SARS-CoV-2. Not to be confused with SARS-CoV-1. SARS-CoV-1 created a disease called SARS. So they didn't want to call the new disease SARS or anything related to SARS or have anything to do with SARS because it's not SARS, but COVID-19 or whatever it will become called is derived from a virus called, let me look it up, SARS-CoV-2, which SARS-CoV-1 and SARS-CoV-2 go back to an even deeper virus family. I'll tell you what it's called. Severe acute respiratory syndrome related coronavirus. So this thing called severe acute respiratory syndrome related coronavirus is a virus, in short, called SARS-CoV, which came from bats. And in the bat world, if you were Batman, pun intended, if you were in the bat world, you would notice that bats get viruses. Tobacco leaves get viruses. Everything gets viruses. And somehow, the bat world is giving us their viruses. Their viruses are evolving to humans. It's happened at least 3 times. SARS, MERS, and COVID-19. Throw in Obama's flu and Ebola, and you're looking at the biggest health crisis events in the 21st century. And the WHO predicted that a novel coronavirus would skip or spill over from the bats to people, and it happened. Because they're watching the bats and they're seeing the evolution, they're watching it happen. HIV was from chimps, and in Africa, ostensibly, as the theory goes, they were eating it's called bushmeat, that was infected with HIV in chimps. And then it adapted to humans and was passed through sexual transmission. Whereas our disease today with COVID-19 isn't sexually transmitted. It's transmitted through, generally like the common cold. Whereas SARS was much more difficult to transmit. Even though the symptoms of SARS and COVID-19 are very similar, albeit a different fatality rate. But the WHO and the organizations that call these things don't want to call it SARS, lest it creates panic. But the disease is called SARS, or the virus, is called SARS. Again, what's it called? Severe acute respiratory syndrome related coronavirus, SARS-CoV. So when they say COVID-19 is SARS related, it isn't. Related is an Icker term. And if you call it SARS-like, it isn't. SARS-like is another virus still in the bat world that has not crossed over to humans. These are the things that we're going to be talking about in this series. Now, is it a messianic event? It's certainly messianic. Is it the Messiah? The end? We don't know. Is it on that path? Absolutely. It's challenging mankind to elevate, become more responsible and knowledgeable and aware. It's a threat that we've never seen, and that's why the world is coming together. It's not a comet. It's not a hydrogen collider. It's not a doomsday prediction. I am on lockdown, and most likely so are you. Because it's real. The world didn't shut down over a comet. In pseudoscience and pseudo math, this is real math, it's real science, and it's really happening. And I think the prophets have known that since the beginning. If there's a tradition in prophecy that the world will eventually globalize, we will eventually get near our furry friends. Travel will become throughout the world. We will spread the disease like the Spanish flu showed us. If the prophets knew these basic intangibles, and if I understand how prophecy works, meaning they knew that three nations would always exist, Esav, Ishmael, and Yaakov. If they knew these things, then you could put the pieces together. There will be the East, there will be the West, there will be the Jews, there will be Ishmael. You can understand the geopolitical situation from biblical components if we believe them to be real. And we see who are the main players: Esav, Ishmael, Yaakov. We see it's real. And the prophets would be able to understand and predict this is what's destined to happen. When enough evolution happens, someone is going to get close enough to the animal kingdom, the viruses will mutate and evolve enough to spill over and create new serious diseases and challenges. And that's what's happening. And I'll close with this and then we'll obviously continue this for weeks to come. I'm starting to think this is what the Torah is all about. Bereshis bar Elohim, the 7 days, 6 to 7 days of creation. First, it's the day of God, then it's the second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, seventh day. Is the Torah warning us how to be responsible Adam? The virus goes through the plant world, through the animal world, and eventually over to Adam. Is the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil virus? Noah, virus. Jewish people, be holy. Don't eat live animals. Don't get close to the blood of the animals that will create these viruses. And create a living condition with animals that there's not a spillover. I am holy, you should be holy. In the Noahide world, that is supposed to be strict upon itself, like Ger, would then prevent these things also. That's what it looks like to me now. And maybe there'll be an event down the road that's even more apropos, more in the books, more in the text, more messianic. Just like the rabbi told me that the Intifada and the Hezbollah war was a possibility. It sure looked like it when missiles were coming down. But it sure didn't look like it when some comet didn't happen. All I know is the whole world sees this. Maybe I'm overemphasizing or embellishing this, but it's at least something. Because the math and science check out, whereas other hype and hysterias don't. I'm not saying it's everything. I'm saying it might be. And what does that mean? It means we're in for changes. They could rule out All new protocols. In Cape Town, we don't take 5,000-minute showers anymore. You preserve water, conserve water. It's a challenge. You got to up your lifestyle and standard of living responsibly. In America, you don't go into a bad neighborhood. Every sector of the world comes with responsibilities. Maybe we are expected to have etiquette when we go out, not to sneeze on each other anymore. 9/11 rolled out travel security concerns. Now you get to the airport 3 hours early, no questions asked. And we take it. We up our game. So that which sticks to this crisis will be a challenge to up our game of our standard of living. Because I'll tell you, it's a fact that the WHO is very much concerned about coronaviruses skipping over in the future. And they predicted this one. And their math and their science equal and work out. So I have a very hard time thinking that this is not as serious as I'm making it out to be. Serious meaning has implications in the spiritual world. The first time maybe ever Judaism is illegal. Purim, going to shuls and minyans greater than 10, big seders. It's now illegal. Jews used to do it in the face of Nazi Germany and pogroms, but it wasn't illegal, not according to Jews. Now it's illegal. And for good cause. It's illegal to kiss a mezuzah. Judaism is outlawed. Let that sink in. Something's going on. And when we look at it in the context of Bereshit and the prophecies, and you look at the wording of Cain and Abel, you died by the hand of your brother. I'm saying pshuto kamashma. The words are taken literally. Noah's in quarantine. Maybe there will be a better shot down the road. Maybe. Right now, it's a very, very good shot. Best shot I've seen, where the physical and the spiritual are really, really in synergy. And it's not some kind of hype that I'm inventing like a comet. I'm in lockdown, and most likely so are you. And it's real. That's all for this week. Hope you enjoyed this first introduction. And this will be an ongoing class. And the research will develop, and we will present the research, the Iker terms, the taxonomy, the knowledge, and how it jives with the Torah in many different forms and facets. Thank you. Stay safe, be well. And that's all for this week. So have a great Shabbos. It'll definitely be an interesting one. And may we see the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu soon in our days, and healthy, bright days ahead. Shkayach.